Good afternoon, and welcome to Politico's Sustainable Future Week. My name is Douglas Busvine. I am Politico's Trade and Agriculture Editor. Well, timing is everything, and I must admit that when the dates for Sustainable Future Week were set earlier this year, before the European election and the political transition, I felt preemptively nervous. Will there be a new commission in place? Will senior policy makers and MEPs be up and running? Will the agenda for the next term be taking shape? Well, I'm glad to say we do have a new commission, since the weekend at least, and Christoph Hansen is in place as the new Food and Agriculture Commissioner, and he's given his first interview to our very own Paula Andres, which was published this morning, and went free to all our readers on Politico.eu today. Here's a few top lines. He wants to move on from farm to fork. He thinks that farmers see this as a top-down imposition. He likes to talk about objectives and aspirations, not so much about targets. He's also going to launch the European Board on Agri-Food, a standing version of the strategic dialogue. That's going to happen this week. There's 30 positions up for grabs, so for those of you in the audience, it might be time to polish up your resumes. And looking further out, Hansen would like to make CAP, Common Agricultural Policy, direct payments, digressive. What does that mean? Well, I think it means that once farms reach a particular size, payouts per hectare would decline gradually. And that's an important justice issue in the farming community. So plenty of food for thought for those panels and interviews that we'll be holding this afternoon, and welcome again. So before we kick off, I'd like to thank our summit partners for making it possible. Our leading partners are Amazon, BMW Group, Coca-Cola Europe, Corteva Agriscience, GE Aerospace, MOVA, and the Polish Electricity Association. Our presenting partners are ADM, EDF, Geopost, GE Vernova, IRU, McCain, and Yara. And our networking partner is A2A. Our visibility partner is the Zoe Institute for Future Fit Economies. Yes, and now for the housekeeping. We love a good debate, so let's keep the conversation going. Share your thoughts with us on X. I'm on Blue Sky now, I don't know about you. Please use our hashtag, Politico Sustainable Future Week. We can't wait to hear your thoughts on the topics of this summit. Some sessions, Paula's, will include a Q&A for our audience here in the room, so please get those questions ready. The sessions are indicated in the program, and our moderators will let you know. As a general rule, we ask you to raise snappy questions, avoid statements, and indicate who you are and which organization you represent. You can ask questions by raising your hand during the dedicated Q&A session. You will be handed a roving microphone. And now I would like to hand over to my colleague, Paula Andres, agriculture and food reporter, and she will moderate the first session this afternoon, Insights from the European Parliament, setting the agriculture agenda for the next 5 years. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Please come take a seat. So welcome, and if you are tuning in now or joining us in the room, this is Politico's Sustainable Future Week Summit, and as Doug already announced, my name is Paula Andres, and I'm agriculture and food reporter at Politico. Well, in our first agri-focus session of the day, we'll be hearing from top lawmakers sitting here on the stage with us in the European Parliament, who will be key in steering up the work in agriculture and food policies in the next 5 years. So this is not a small task. I wish you luck. Also, a reminder, as our editor also already mentioned, for those of you joining in person, there will be time for questions with the audience. We will be passing around a mic. So please start thinking of your questions, and I won't be offended if they are better than my questions. So please think about them. OK, now let me introduce our panelists. So we have Michal Vizik, an MEP from Renew, from Slovakia. You are a substitute in the Agri Committee and a member at the Environment Committee. We have Dario Nardella, an MEP from the Socialists from Italy, and coordinator in the Agriculture Committee. Herbert Dorfman, MEP from the center-right European People's Party, from Italy as well, and coordinator of the Agri Committee. And the last coordinator, Thomas Weitz, from the Greens from Austria. Thank you very much for being here. Yes, so I would like to start with a thought related to the interview with the Commissioner, Christoph Hansen, that our editor was just talking about a bit earlier. So we're just at the beginning of this new cycle in new politics. But there are some things that never change. For example, farmers are still on the streets in some parts of Europe, whether it's over excessive regulation, unfair prices, or international competition. But this is all while environmental agencies keep warning us about the triple planetary crisis that is already shaking up the agricultural sector. So, Mr. Dorfman, if I can start with you, is the solution to that abandoning Green Deal targets and reducing rules?
No, I don't think so. And I do not think that the European Parliament is ready to abandon the objectives of the Green Deal, nor in agriculture, neither on other topics. I think this we read this morning from the new commissioner. We have a commissioner now with clear political ideas. I missed this in the last 5 years. It was not easy to understand what is the political will in the Commission. I hope that, and I'm sure on this we will improve. The Parliament worked for 5 years on the Green Deal. We made most of the regulations we wanted to do, and I cannot see political will to abandon them. But we need to be aware that on the other side, there is a request for less bureaucratic policy, to have less red tape, and on this we should reflect. And for example, some days ago we reflected on the deforestation law. I'm convinced that we can keep alive the objective of the law to avoid deforestation in the world and Europe. But I'm also aware, and I think that we are creating with the existing law unnecessary bureaucratic burdens or bureaucratic obstacles which we could easily avoid. And I think this was a good example how we can, yes, keep alive the Green Deal, but on the other side reflect how we really achieve objectives.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Please, for the rest of the speakers, feel free if you want to raise your hand after someone intervenes to rebuke or give your own thoughts. I know that deforestation is probably one that you would like to take on.
Well, I have a bit of a different view of the realities that we actually see in European Parliament. And I mean, Conservatives tried to weaken the regulation substantially with amendments to exclude traders from being captured by the legislation. Yes, this was your amendment. You pulled it back then. You tried to postpone it for 2 years, for 3 years. You tried to include this non-risk category, which is nonsense in terms of world trade rules, which is actually what also the Council actually gave you as feedback. So there's a weakening. There has been a weakening in the last mandate. Yes, due to farmers' protests, crop rotation was abandoned. Also, there was extra subsidies for artificial fertilizer. But that doesn't mean that Conservatives want to abandon the whole Green Deal. That yes, but weaken it here and there, yes, relativizing the objectives. That's what we see. And let's see how the next mandate is going to unfold, because, I mean, if I listen to the colleagues to the right of EPP, well, one statement of a colleague, I will not name him, was, well, finally we have stopped the invasion of NV people into agri. Yeah? So I don't know, if agriculture politicians don't understand that without a partnership between climate, environment, and agriculture, first of all, we're not going to meet our climate goals. Second of all, we're not going to manage biodiversity crisis. And third of all, and maybe most important to farmers, we will not be able to keep the budgets for the common agricultural policy, because there's a lot of demand on budget in the moment. And so I really think we should stick together and find common solutions.
Maybe per allusion, I will come back to Mr. Vizek, since there was a mention of MB colleagues in the parliament. So would you like to tell us, yes, what you think about this issue, but more generally, from the Environment Committee perspective, what do you think of the direction that agri lawmakers are taking here?
Well, there definitely is differences in, let's say, paradigms or viewpoints of these two particular committees on the same issues, for instance, on agriculture. I think that the ENVI committee used to be really more profoundly ambitious towards some environmental goals. I think that they have perceived the need for improvement of agriculture also into the direction of being more, let's say, climate friendly, environmental friendly, as a necessity, not as an option, you know. So that might be the disparity between these two committees. Now I have to also say that a lot of has changed. The composition, even within the ENVI committee, seems to be, let's say, like 50-50, also regarding the ambitions, which is not a good outcome, so to say, because the ambitions are very needed. Your first question was whether the parliament or the farmers should abandon the Green Deal.
Targets.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that would be actually suicidal, you know, because there will be two players in the next 5 years who will decide what the direction of the agriculture, in particular, will be. One of these members or players will be the one who we can negotiate with. And you know, if you can negotiate with someone, the outcome might be also that you will withdraw all your ambitions and say nothing is happening. Let's go the old way. Give the money to our people, everything will be fine. Well, that's the one part. And then there is another part of the players who might be key players who you cannot negotiate with. And that's, for instance, the climate crisis. How can you negotiate with climate crisis? You either adapt to that or will be affected really, really harshly. So I think that it's for the sake of the agriculture really to emphasize also this aspect of their existence, of their environment, to really not to close the eyes, not to pretend that nothing is happening. And if we start to do it like immediately, the better so. In that regard, I'm very happy to hear from Commissioner Hansen that he's aware of the situation and he can be perceived as a sort of a progressive commissioner in this regard, which is a good news.
Thank you. Mr. Nardella, I'd like to bring you in as well to hear your thoughts about this, and more specifically on the initial question on the Green Deal targets and the fact that, as Mr. Dorfman mentioned in his first intervention, there is a bit of a shift in the previous commission and this one in terms of the vision. Do you think that shifting visions or priorities every 5 or 6 years is giving farmers the predictability that they need?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for inviting me here. So I think we can't abandon the Green Deal achievements, but we have to abandon the conflict between Agri Committee and ENVI Committee that we experimented in the last legislature in the European Parliament. I mean that agriculture is not a problem for environmental achievements, for Green Deal objectives. If we have the energy the cleverness to change the approach on agriculture, we can't have any green transition without social transition and digital transition. If we don't increase the investments, also in the CAP for innovation, digital innovation, technology, to support farmers to increase the sustainable achievements, I think we can't have a real new Green Deal in agriculture field. And at the same time, we must push on social transition in terms of young farmers involving new generations we need in our country to have a new enterprises, a new agricultural production model. We have many good experiments that we can underline. For example, the organic food. We discussed a lot about organic food because in a mission letter from President of the European Commission, von der Leyen, she mentioned organic food both in letter to Christoph Hansen and letter to Commissioner Barhelyi, which is a potential conflict. But I consider organic food one of the key solutions that we can adapt to have a more sustainable agriculture, but obviously we have to invest on innovation, we have to invest on a new generation involved in the agriculture sector. So we have a big space in front of us, and we only have to work together, keeping together social transition, digital transition, and green transition.
Thank you. I think one of the big elephants in the room when we discuss all the things that you are mentioning now is also the fact that the parliament has clearly shifted further to the right, and so has the European Commission after the EU elections. So since you are all working in this new environment now, and speaking about agriculture, I would like to put an open question. Is this shift in the benefit to farmers, the political shift that has happened in the European Parliament? And are there any policies in which you see possible collaborations or even common points with these groups further to the right, including ECR?
If I may start, I mean, in terms of the choice of the Commissioner Hansen, and this is related to this question, I think it's a good choice because he comes from a farm. And he has seen and he has witnessed how difficult it is to feed a family with farming, basically, and how the farming realities look like. And this is for conventional farming, but it's also for organic farming. And there's a big question on the table that we need to answer. I mean, we will not be able to compensate everything with public funds. We need a market that is also ready to pay farmers a fair price for what they deliver. And if they have additional requirements to deliver in terms of environment, in terms of biodiversity, in terms of social security, workers' rights, and so on, this needs to be reflected in the price. I'm stemming from a country that has 26% organic agriculture already, which would be the overall target for the European Union. The problem is not that we do not find additional farmers that are happy to engage into organic farming. The problem is that we also need to develop a market that is ready to uptake that amount of food that we produce and to actually guarantee the farmers, again, a fair price for the amount of work and for the amount of input they put into this. And on this question, you can find quite a lot of unity beyond ideological questions. I mean, some may support organic more and less, yeah, okay, but on the question that if we want to have farmers in rural areas, and in many areas, farmers are the backbone of the rural areas. If we want to keep these rural areas lively, we have to keep farmers on the land. And this is something, I think, where many of us from different groups can sign up to, and also the Commissioner signs up to. And I think in this field, this is a good basis to start to work.
Mr. Dorfman, maybe you share those remarks?
Yes, I fully agree. I hear a lot of talks also here in the, let's say, Brussels bubble, about changes in agriculture. And I always say, and this is a lot of consumers and people who speak how agriculture change, and very often they are not aware that the consumer going to the supermarket every day can determine this change. And I have the feeling that there's a lot of people around speaking about changes, but once they go to the supermarket to take choices, they do not support these changes. And this is also true in the organic sector. I fully agree with you. We will go towards a higher degree of organic in Europe if there's a market for this. The market is if consumers go to the supermarket or wherever and buy organic products. But back to your question, well, I think the changes in the European Parliament, and by the way, not only in the European Parliament, but also in the Council, are a result of democratic decisions. And I mean, we are in Europe, we say we are, let's say, like the mother of democracy, so we should respect democracy. We could not agree, but we have to respect voters' choices. And we have a different parliament. But I remain convinced that the important choices, the important decisions also of this parliament can happen only in the center of this parliament. They cannot happen elsewhere. And this we will see in the years to come. And then there might be, and this was the case also in the last 5 years, because in the last 5 years there was a majority in the parliament at the left of us. And the left of us, if they needed to find a majority without us, without the EPP, they didn't have any problem to go to the communists and try to find a majority. But this was for single decisions. But the important decisions, for example, and I think the most important decisions we will have to take together here, how to evolve the common agricultural policy, what are the main lines of the policy, this can happen only in the center of the parliament and in the big groups of the parliament. Because if this does not happen in the center of the parliament, it will not have a majority in the council. So this we need to be aware, and from this point of view, I do not think that the decision-making process will be so different if compared with the last 5 years.
Mr. Nardella, I saw you shaking your head. So can I ask you, as someone on the left of the EPP, is there something you disagree with that?
I believe that we must start from a very clear point. So the groups represented here from us, Liberal, SD, EPP, and Greens, are the groups who July 18th supported clearly Ursula von der Leyen with a vote. This is the majority that we need to reinforce in the next 5 years that we have in front of us. Why? Because we need a more clear and strong European advocacy. If we consider the ECR group part of this political majority supporting Ursula von der Leyen, we will do a very big mistake. Indeed, during the vote for European Commission, which is unfortunately very weak if we consider the results. Only 30% of ECR supported the European Commission. Why? Because the Italian delegation, the Meloni political party, Fratelli d'Italia, they voted against von der Leyen in July and for von der Leyen Commission in November. Where is the coherence? Where is the logic? The only question is that we have Raffaele Fitto in the European Commission. That's why 30% of ECR groups voted for in favor of European Commission last week. So I'm convinced that we must work to keep this majority. Obviously, we have a new political framework because we have more conservative governments in Europe and different majority both in European Parliament and European Council, but I want to start from July, from these 4 groups, and we must find and work day by day to find a common points, not only for agriculture, but also for all the other big questions we have in front of us. Because I believe that it's impossible, for example, and I'm finishing, it's impossible, practically impossible, to have a foreign affair European politic or defense European politics with the patriots or with part of VCR that are very extreme rights, that they have very extreme rights positions, sometimes against European common defense, and with very big difference, for example, on Ukraine war and many others, global issues and challenges we have in front of us.
I have to say we invited a representative of the ECR in Agri Committee to come and join us in this session, but they rejected to join us. So because we are mentioning and speaking of them, I just thought to make that clear. So Mr. Bizek, you just spoke of a similar shift in the Environment Committee, but also as a substitute member of Agri. We would also like to hear your thoughts on potential collaboration or not with some of the groups and new groups in the European Parliament.
Well, the essence of increase of the far right is very, very present in Parliament. Just to stress one thing, the third biggest group in Parliament currently is former ID. Now the Patriots of Europe, which is a group that my group has still cordon sanitaire put on. So. But it's very prominent. I wouldn't agree with your statement that it's also that pronounced in the Commission. I rather would say that the Commission is really built around the support of the Ursula von der Leyen former majority. So it's really centric. It's pro-European. There's an obvious continuity to previous mandate, and I think that's a good start. From the perspective of the agriculture, I'm very happy to hear that Ursula von der Leyen and her college are, or presented to us, that they are committed to reflect on one specific document, which is the strategic dialogue. That is very much oriented towards agriculture, and that goes definitely for Commissioner Hansen. So in this regard, I see that the continuity also in relation to European Green Deal is there. The question is whether the Parliament will support the strategy or the plan of the Commission, and that is the big question, because we see the proportional changes, and we see that the only solution is not only the Ursula von der Leyen majority built around the centrist part with support of the Greens, but there is also an option to build another majority leaning towards right and far right, which is actually quite a realistic option. We have seen it during the vote on deforestation regulation, where exactly that majority, despite not being very big, has actually approved the weakening of this regulation. I wonder whether this will be the future scenario as well. If so, then, well, we jeopardize the future of European Green Deal, of European agriculture, of European pro-democratic essence, and all of that is jeopardized. So I hope that all of the relevant groups will be very responsible in the House of the Parliament, and we will really support Ursula von der Leyen cabinet and really stick to the continuity that's important for the sake of the agriculture itself.
I have 10 more minutes left before we open the floor for questions of the audience, and I would like to pose 2 more questions to all of you. So let's get to it. There will also be a new group soon competing with you over having a say on agricultural policy for the next 5 years, and this is the new European Agri-Food Board that will be launched this week, or at least the call for applications will be launched this week. So they will not have legislative powers, but there seems to be more emphasis and growing interest in listening to civil society, to farmers, and to industry groups, building from the strategic dialogue that you were mentioning. So the Parliament, and especially I'm looking here at the EPP as well, was quite critical on the strategic dialogue's way of policy making, and even some of the recommendations. So I would like to know what are your thoughts on the idea of having this dialogue permanently?
No, at least if I can start, at least my group was never critical about the strategic dialogue. I think it was a good idea to start this dialogue, and I think it's a really interesting and good input for policy making, and I think the board can have the same role in the future. But it needs to be clear that at the end, a democratic elected body, the parliament and the council, needs to decide about the policy. This cannot be done by the board or by the strategic dialogue. But I think we should take the final report of the strategic dialogue very seriously. That was a huge work. And by the way, I think to see agricultural policy or food policy a bit more comprehensive, not focused only on what's happening on a farm, but having a look on the whole food chain, starts on a farm and goes till the final consumer. I think this is a good and necessary approach.
No, yeah, I agree about how important and new is this approach adopted with the strategic dialogue. But we can't consider strategic dialogue as a menu à la carte. So we can't select the points that we prefer. So the people coming from Greens want only the green part of strategic dialogue. EPP want only the part about competitivity, and we, SND, only the social part. No. We have to face the challenges launched by strategic dialogue in his total philosophy. And which is the philosophy coming from strategic dialogue? I mean, first is the new method. So agriculture, I learned, is a very complex system. And it's not, we can't adopt only a vertical approach to develop, to promote agriculture. So we need a very horizontal dialogues with small farmers and big industries, with member states, with the social stakeholders, with consumers, and with the distribution value chain. So we have many subjects included in this new approach. And the second lesson is that we can't consider agriculture only a business of Agri-Committee or Commissioner Hansen. And I have here a concrete example. The relation between the rural area development, so agriculture development, and cohesion policy. These two portfolios are the two faces of the same coin. And that's why I believe that Vice President Commissioner Fitto, he needs our support. He needs SND and EPP and Renew and Green support, because we know, and we must be very clear, we know that European Commission maybe wanted to a new model of European budget. They want to concentrate all big decisions in one strategy for only one big budget without cohesion policy funds and agricultural funds. This is a common challenge that we have to face. That's why digital dialogue is a piece of the big mosaic, and we have to adopt all this message involving, obviously, European Parliament forces that they are not included in the first part of a digital strategic dialogue.
Thank you. I would like to quickly give the floor to Mr. Visick and Mr. White before my last question.
Okay, I will be very brief on strategic dialogue because I already mentioned it.
Yeah.
It is a very useful document because the authors were really consisting of several group of really significant stakeholders. There were 19 relevant stakeholders being or working on this paper, and I think that from this perspective, the outcome is really relevant. To me, it was really a huge surprise to see the outcome because I was expecting quite contrary outcome. This one is relatively critical towards the current status of agriculture and is proposing really ways how to improve the situation. And I think that they are really very much coherent with science, with the needs of the people in the field, with the stakeholders, with the businesses, with the NGOs, with the scientists. So in this regard, it should be really something that we consider really seriously and trying to reflect it as much as possible in our decision-making process. Whether this is going to be the reality is the very big question. From my observation, I see quite the resistance, especially in the Agri Committee, to actually accept it as a whole, as a complex document. I rather see some sort of cherry picking. I only question whether we have the right to actually be the one who picks the cherries, because the decision making or the really the relevant press already had their saying. So why should we somehow filter that? You know, I don't really see the reason for that. So I hope that it will be really reflected both by Commission and by Parliament as much as possible.
Mr. Watts, do you think the committee will be cherry-picking, and do you think the new board will maybe put some pressure on the lawmakers?
Well, first of all, the result of the strategic dialogue is kind of a cherry picking already, because if you read, okay, yes, more biodiversity, that's great if you find us some extra money. We're ready to do additional stuff for climate if you find us some extra money. Yeah, animal welfare, we really like it if you find us some extra money. I don't know where this extra money should come from, and let's see in the moment when we realize that there's not going to be any extra money, and it's going to be about the cake that is existing and how it is distributed, let's say, how much dialogue we still have. But I mean, dialogue is the precondition for compromise. So this is the core of how we develop legislation in the European Union. So very much welcome, and it's the opposite of polarization. And polarization is what we've seen in the election campaign. One side said, well, Green Deal is endangering food security, you know, while floods and droughts and new pests, animal diseases like blue tongue, all related to climate and extreme weather, are sweeping away our harvests. Obviously, we have a problem with food security, so security of supply, but it's not the Green Deal, it's rather the opposite. It's ignoring the Green Deal, it's ignoring climate change, it's ignoring biodiversity loss that is putting our security of food supply in danger in the long run. But let's see, and this new institution, well, von der Leyen came to our group meeting, this is a bit internal now, but however, and she said, we're realizing that the impact of the market on the farmers' reality is much bigger than we thought. I'm like, okay, good morning. But, you know, better late than never that this is realized. So we cannot compensate everything with, you know, additional cap budget. We need to look into the market. So we need to look into food processors, the market power of retailers. We need to look into global competition. You mentioned it earlier. And do we have a fair level playing field there where we can compete? And so if this group answers these questions, how to link agriculture questions and how to grant farmers a survival and a good income, with good, healthy food and food security, then I'm happy to receive some recommendations.
Let me, for my last question, let me link to this thought and open the can of worms now in the last 2 minutes and ask you about Mercosur. And I will ask you to be very short for this one, I'm so sorry. But we have now, the Commission has just briefed your trade colleagues in the Parliament on the ongoing negotiations with the Mercosur countries. But they have denied the agriculture MEPs to have the same session with a Commission representative. With farmers being the main opposition to the deal, what do you think this signals or this shows from the Commission side? You may take the floor.
No, so, you know, Europe is the most open global market. Mm-hmm. That's why I think we need efficient and good trades. But when we talk about Mercosur, I think we must be very careful about reciprocity principle, which is the most critical point that we can to underline. So we agree with Mercosur, but we have to change some part of this trade to support our producers, our farmers, for a free but fair global market that we need if we want to keep our potentialities.
Thank you. very shortly. Maybe Mr. Dorfman.
Yeah, I mean, I'm well aware the problems the agriculture sector in Europe may face with Mercosur. I need to say I have two hats on my head. On one side, the agriculture view. I've been vice president of Eurolat, so of the let's say common parliament between the European Parliament and the Latin American parliaments. And I mean, that is a decision which needs to be taken. We are discussing now for 20 years, and we need to say yes or no. And if we say no, we need to be aware what this means geopolitically. And this goes far beyond agriculture, because this is the last region in the world where we have the possibility to have a strong connection. And if we lose this, this could be geopolitically a big problem for us. And that is, we need to solve, I think, or to try to find a solution for the agriculture markets.
Thank you. Mr. White.
Yes, find solutions. I mean, yes, okay, we want to export toll-free machinery into Brazil and other Mercosur countries. We want to have access to the public procurement procedures. And sure, the Brazilians and others say, okay, what's in for us? And what they export is mining products and commodities. So agricultural products summarized under commodities. I've been to Brazil last summer. I've talked to the Small Farmers Association, 20 to 400 hectares, just for the experts here. They say, please don't do it. The pressure from industrial agriculture on our lands is enormous. I talked to the workers, labor organizations. They're saying, please don't do it. There's so much child labor, forced labor already in this sector. I'm talking to indigenous communities. They're saying, look, they're poisoning us with pesticides. Please don't accelerate that. I'm talking to environmentalists or to the environmental police of Brazil that says, look, we have 150 staff people for 10,000 kilometers of deforestation line. We don't manage it. Please don't accelerate this. I mean, we have to understand if we want to have access to the markets, we have to give them something. But to put our farmers into a situation where they cannot compete anymore because they have to and shall comply to environmental, animal welfare and biodiversity regulations, while the imported products do not need to do that, we have to be aware that this will be heavily destructive to European and, let's say, progressive, green-minded, climate-friendly and biodiversity-friendly agriculture in the European Union.
Mr. Rizek, would you like to close this point?
I would only underline what Thomas Weitz has already said. It's really important that we, beside all of that has been mentioned, also protect our own farmers. They are very heavily affected by the cheap imports from third countries, and the price of those imports is very much related to them bypassing actually our norms, you know, really harming the environment, harming the native people. So any sort of trade agreement like this should not mean a backtracking from our own values. And if it's so, then, well, the Mercosur will be dead as it has been dead for a decade already or something like that. So
a couple, yeah. Thank you very much. So now we'll actually open the floor for a couple of questions from the audience. So please, questions, not statements, if possible. Don't do like me. And yeah, let us know who you are and what's your organization. I see a hand there on the second row. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Megan Sapp. I'm from the European Alliance for Regenerative Agriculture. Amongst my regenerative farmers, I am also one from the north of Spain. We are already implementing the vision set out in the strategic dialogue, and we very much are trying to open up our arms to help transition at scale those who need to go in that direction of travel. But we're also seeing many of those colleagues trying to backtrack from what was agreed in the strategic dialogue. How can we, as the pioneering farmers of Europe, support that transition and that direction of travel and get there as quickly as possible, considering that we're running out of time for the climate crisis?
Short answers, so we can take another question. Thank you.
Well, convince lawmakers. I mean, you don't need to start with me. I think I'm converted, but there's others.
That was short. Great. To the point. Anyone else wants to take it?
Maybe be influential. Yeah, that's the be loud. We are here to hear from you. So be persistent. You know, that's a nice word as well. And also, good pilots are always very helpful. You know, if you show, if you translate that vision into practice, that's always very helpful.
Yeah, very shortly, as Douglas told in the opening of this roundtable, we need a bottom-up process and not top-down. This is the very question about the implementation of strategic dialogue. And sometimes, so I have been a mayor for 10 years. The problem that I feel sometimes is that we are living in a big ball in Brussels. So we need to talk constantly with our stakeholders, with the farmers, with the protagonists of economy and social economy. That's why we need this bottom-up process.
So you mean organic agriculture, farmers like me coming to the European Parliament
but in general.
and fighting for... No?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
I didn't participate at the strategic dialogue. I only read the final document, but I didn't see any line where it said that all Europe needs to convert to regenerative agriculture or to organic farming. I understood the final document. It was saying in each form of agriculture, we need to do it in a sustainable way, also conventional farming. And this is, what they are doing is, sorry to say it, is a bit of cherry picking, as Daya said before. No? So that's my model, and I want to have this model all over Europe. But that's not the strategic dialogue. I think the strategic dialogue said that we have different forms of agriculture. Regenerative agriculture could be one of them, organic farming are one of them, conventional farming is one of them, and will still go on, but we need to do all of them in a sustainable way. That's at least what I understood from the final document, but as I said, I was not a member of the strategic dialogue.
Unless you want to say something else, we take a second question. Oh, okay. Maybe from the person in the front.
Nicola Stampone, young Italian organic farmer and at the same time consultant in farmers. My question is particularly about how do you plan to protect and promote agriculture and development of a rural area, considering that our farmer, so also 3 generations of my family, listen to Renzo Pianos, are the architecture of our territories and so important for our Europe, in particular for the rural area. How do you plan to protect and promote agriculture and development rural area while simultaneously opening the competition with Latin America?
The Mercosur can of worms again. Please go ahead.
I mean, I can give a very clear statement. First of all, work on the market power of farmers in negotiation for their prices, so they get a fairer price for their produce. But secondly, I advocate for a model that the basic payments are not calculated per hectare, but rather per workforce. And I'm not talking about additional environmental standards. Yeah, you still can pay them per hectare. But the basic and main substitutes shall go after workplaces, how many workplaces a farm is actually offering, and not along the hectares. This will be a possibility to change our system and to actually keep farmers on the land.
Mr. Dorman.
No, I think that is a very important question, because we sometimes underestimate that farming happens somewhere, and these are rural areas. And the quality of life of rural areas is extremely important for farming. I'm coming from the middle of the Alps. If we do not have a lively rural area where people can live there, people will not go on to farm, because it's connected. It's not like an industry which you can put here or there. That doesn't make a big difference if you have access to a street or to infrastructure. And therefore, we need to combine agriculture activity with rural development. And only if we do this, we will be successful. And therefore, I was always a supporter and a fan of the second pillar of the Common Agricultural Policy. I would be also in favor to shift even more from the first pillar to the second pillar, because I think it would make sense. But I'm also aware that the rural development cannot be only a duty of European policies and of European agriculture policy, because it needs to be a combination between regional policy, national policy, and a European policy. But again, if we do not have lively rural areas, we will not have farmers, and we will not have young farmers in Europe, because they want to live somewhere where there's a quality of life.
Thank you. Two closing statements here.
Again, I think we need the courage to make new choices. And if we talk about rural area development, I think we have to make a new fund, strategic fund, to support the rural areas. Outside from CAP budget. Because the problem is exactly to move a lot of energy, economic energy, from agricultural direct support to rural area development. That's why I underlined the relation with the cohesion policy budget. So if we want to stress the rural area strategy with infrastructures, with services, to involve new generations, new families, new farmers, we need a specific fund, strategic fund. And Thomas talked about the extra budget. So where do we can find this strategy, this extra budget? I would like to come back to a Draghi report. We need Euro bonds. We need a common European debt to invest on competitivity, on strategic achievements like rural area, strategic agenda for European Union.
Thank you. Mr. Visic, again, I'd like to give you the final closing remarks now.
Okay, so about the protection of our farmers, I again say it's about level playing field, it's about no double standards allowed in the relation between our domestic production and the global production we might be competing with. It has to be a fair competition, then I think it's the best protection of our farming sector. What I want to stress is actually there is a lot of challenges ahead of agriculture, and I think that the most critical one is not related to climate crisis, it's not related to economy, it's related to the fact that there is ever fewer people working in agriculture and willing to work in agriculture. And this is a complex issue, probably a social one, which I don't think we have a receipt for. So maybe there's a time to really be courageous and think about agriculture in new perspectives, where this lack of personnel, this lack of people willing to actually do this super hard work is a reality, and how are we going to tackle that? I don't think that discussion is there on the table, but it will have to come, because otherwise I'm quite afraid about the future, and in the maybe a medium-term perspective.
I agree. The social aspect of farming is often overlooked. So I wish we had more time to unpack that. But okay, so we will close this session here. Thank you all, including our audience, for your engaging contributions and participation. And I hope you got a small test of what the next 5 years will look like. And now I will ask you to remain seated. In a few minutes, or actually now, our agriculture and trade editor, Douglas Busvine, will come back to moderate an interview with Senior Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer at Corteva, Brooke Cunningham. Thank you very much.